That's definitely my motto.
Yeah. And so I guess I get right into it because I know you're quite busy and don't want to take too much of your time. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ardavan, and you can call me Ardi if it's too long. And I'm an Iranian student doing my master's in University Malaya in Malaysia. And my subject just happened. I was very interested in role playing games and how people take on new personas and how people can form friendships within these environments in MMORPGs and how those connections can form basically. And suddenly and years ago had come across Eve Online, but recently I was looking for proper MMOs that could be a kind of something for other MMOs to look at, and suddenly Eve Online came up, and actually one person on Reddit mentioned a talk that you gave on Eve Online in Eve Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was quite taken aback by that. So I wish to talk to you about see how this game came about and how you're trying to enhance it and how you may have failed in some areas and how it can which route you can go inside, which route you can go to.
Okay. So is this is your senior thesis? Is this a master's or a bachelor's?
This is my master's thesis.
This is your master's. Okay. Senior thesis in UX design.
And yes, in media studies and slash UX design.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds cool. Yeah.
All right. So, do you have any questions or problems with or anything you want to discuss first, or we can?
No, but just to be clear, you are Ardavan Hematpour.
Yeah, it's a
Hemat.
very,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
Ardavan. Call me Ardi. It's totally cool, man. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I just I received an email over the weekend, which I guess is the same request where that I was answering just now. So you say in that email that you also have some interesting insights you've been gathering from other Eve players.
Yeah, I'm trying. I spent the last 2 weeks spent talking to. By the way, Grey Gal sends her regards. I don't know if you remember.
Ah, thanks. Grey Gal is awesome.
Yeah, oh, she's fantastic. Yeah, and before I go anywhere, I should just send a message and say, the message she asked was, when will we finally have the ACL list for God's sake? Yes, which is
Yes.
actually a good feature, I believe. For I know know your talks about players retention, so I
Yeah.
think that might actually help out. Yeah, I've been talking to Eve players for the past 2 weeks. Manic Velocity, Starship Resurrections, all these like YouTubers that have done it, and a few more. And I'm quite taken aback by it. Everybody are quite well. Everybody are much older than I expect.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and they've played Eve for quite a considerable amount of time. And um, and yeah, do you want to add anything to this, or should I should just get on?
No, I was just gonna say, if you have any interesting insights from those interviews regarding your research topic, I would love to hear them because I'm always collecting insights and data on this topic.
All right. The main thing, well, inside there, everybody are quite fascinated by. I don't think I've gathered anything that is quite out of your reach within the what you have already spoken within the game. A considerable chunk of them are there for, are actually love to help. The people who are going to the more like I did categorize them judging by how player categories are. Are you a helper or a killer or you're there to socialize? The players who are much more killer based are far more uh, rude, to be honest, when they get into an interview. I
Okay.
I did a pilot study and all. I did a pilot study and like they're the ones that their aim is basically looting and killing and scheming are far less friendlier compared to everybody else. So I was like, oh, so it does match. It would match their real life personality.
Yeah.
One thing I was quite taken aback by is like MMORPGs, like the main function of it is like the character creation and lore playing in the game doesn't really seem to be happening much in EVE Online.
Okay.
And wanted to know like if that was just on purpose, or is this something that is just like have went wrong with the game? Not went wrong, but it's like nobody in the game talks about the lore. The people I have spoken with, the only people who do role play, as into role play in the game, are the people most to go with Amar, with the Amari race compared to
Okay.
the other three.
And when you say nobody seems to role play, are you comparing this to insights from other games or?
Also insight to other games, because I've been talking to Warcraft players as well. I decided not to go with Warcraft, but I think because there's enough research done on it, but I wanted to see how Warcraft players play, and they actively participate in role playing far more than EVE Online players. EVE Online players are
Yeah.
much more there for socialization and exploration.
Yeah.
Warcraft players are like, oh, I'm a mage, or I'm a this and at that, and they really spend time working on the character. EVE
Yeah.
Online players, none. Only Amar players are the ones that showed a lot more interest. A prime example of it is actually Space Pub.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. I think there are two primary reasons, or at least there are two primary reasons I can think of why this would be like this in EVE Online. The first one, of course, is that the race in EVE Online doesn't matter to the same degree as it does in other games. I mean, if you choose Amar versus Kaldari, you don't get any specific like now I'm way better at this. You know, the because you can train all the skills in all of the races. So your choice on race has less impact on your gameplay than it has in particularly with games like Warcraft. I think that's number one. The second thing is Eve is a socioeconomic system with like a resource-based system, which we just give to the players, and then the players do what they want with it, and that is the content. Uh, Compared to like in Warcraft, where it's more like the game developer creates a dragon and that is the content that the players have to fight against. So the game developer has much more control over like what should the lore be and why. I mean, we've done this a little bit now with the Triglavians,
Yes.
but mostly that like the average Eve player when he is competing in the game or playing the game, his lore is what is happening in his corp with like what are the other players in his corp doing. So that is less to do with like we are doing this because we chose this race, but more with like, hey, this guy just suicide ganked one of our CEOs and we need to get vengeance, and like that is the lore. So
Yes.
I think those are the two primary reasons I can think of. I mean, if you have other hypotheses, I would love to hear them, but this doesn't surprise me though.
Yeah, the players are like you've mentioned, like it's player create their own stuff to do in the game. Everybody talk about the same thing. It's like we want to
Yeah,
make our own adventure happen.
yeah.
I don't know why is it toward Amar that they play a lot more lore
No,
base.
I, I don't know. I have no idea why that would be the case.
Is it maybe I don't know. Maybe it's because of the a certain background that you've created, and uh, because Amar compared to the other three have a much more. That's my hypothesis. Is that they have a much more distinct look and a much more distinct features and characteristics. So maybe that's why people might be drawn to roleplay as that. That's just what I can think of basically with this.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I honestly can't think of a reason why that would be an outlier.
Hmm. And do you think the game has any way like had has it caused any problems for the game? This lack of role playing in it, lack of emphasization on races and everything.
I don't know. That's a good question. A game designer would probably be better to ask about this. I mean, if I were to guess, I mean, this is purely just pulling something out of thin air. I haven't done any research on this, but I would assume because one of the things I keep studying and it keeps fascinating me is how incredibly strong the bonds are that the players form in our game. They're really strong, and compared to other games, like they last decades, and they, you know, they really go deep into like the meat world, as Hilmar would say, the real physical world. And like we've discovered a whole lot of reasons for why this is. One of the things I'm hypothesizing, which I don't know if it's true, is because we have less of, you know, your in-game persona hidden behind a lore. You are you experience yourself much closer to, you know, yourself playing the game instead of like projecting in-game lore persona into the game. So instead of it's like you, the troll mage,
Yes.
Artie is playing the game, it's much closer to, well, actually Artie is just kind of who I am in the real life, because I don't have to be like a troll, you know, mage.
Yes.
So I think that might make it more real for, I know it does for some of our players, because some of our players have specifically mentioned this. So the commitment to the game might be more personal. But again, I'm just hypothesizing. I don't know. I haven't done any specific studies on this. As in terms of, you were asking about limitations. I mean, that's probably a double-edged sword, right? Because if you can project like a version of yourself into a game, that probably means you're more willing to go, you know, be vulnerable and expose yourself earlier, I would imagine.
Yes.
Because that is some of the key challenges we deal with. Is when new players enter a game, they feel very overwhelmed because there's like a lot of choices. You can do a lot of things, and for most of the successful paths into the game, you kind of need to expose yourself to something. You need to expose yourself to danger, to human connection, to, you know, joining fleets, to applying for corps, which makes you vulnerable, right?
Yes.
And that is what makes people scared. That is what makes them like stressed, and most people just usually don't like to deal with this stuff until like a couple of weeks into their journey, when they feel they understand the world.
Yeah.
But in Eve, we've seen this time and time again. Those players that are willing to take this risk early, they fare a lot better in the game. And maybe if you would have a lore, if you would have a stronger lore persona to hide behind, maybe you would be willing to take this risk earlier. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing.
I think just my take is that the players, judging by the few, I have another 10, 12 interviews I have with other players I've scheduled up. The players I've interviewed thus far, the players who mostly create their characters based on their own personality, based on their own features. And they tend to be a lot more open and socialized. But the few players that I did talk to who did not, who created other personas, were the ones that tend to. This is I haven't had 50 people to measure to that scale, but the ones that created a different look for the character are the ones that tend to maybe betray the corporation, maybe do something a little bit more sneaky, because I asked them about betrayal, or asked them if if they've been betrayed or betrayed others. And I don't know how true it can be. This is only three of the players I've interviewed so far created
Yeah,
a character.
yeah.
A dude created a girl character. Like most of them, all three of them were guys. I created either a different look of a character, or as like a female. So they tend to be the ones that are willing to twist a little bit and do something behind the scenes, or betray the core.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe
Interesting.
that will help in some sense. Now to the topic of the how the friendship building. How did the game came? How do you balance the population based on the player's category? Has the game suffered in any way? Because like I know you did have the war element back in the time. I don't know how you've managed that, so new players don't get attacked by killers.
Yeah.
By yeah. How did you come about the population modulation, basically? Player category modulation, I should say.
You're gonna have to be more specific.
Specific as in a sense like, okay, if I'm playing in this certain space and I'm a new character and but the game can be filled between helpers, people who are there to socialize or explore,
Yeah,
or with killers. Now if we have too much killers, we're gonna have more problem. The people who are there to socialize are gonna have a problem.
yeah,
They don't get out because they're like, hey, I'm here to socialize. I get killed instantly, like left and right. Like, how do you manage to balance that out for a player, or you just let the system take over by itself?
yeah. So I mean, what makes Eve unique is that we do fairly little intervention, especially compared to other video games. And it is the players mostly that do the weeding and sorting out and stuff. But we do try to maintain. I mean, like you were saying with, I mean, we do have security level of spaces. We do have null sec, low sec, high sec, and in high sec, if you attack another player, you get penalized by Concord, which is the in-game police force, which comes up and kills you. Like if I'm a newbie now in the game and you're a veteran, or I mean, you don't have to be a veteran. If you're any player and you come up to me in high sec and you kill me, there will be like an NPC space police that will come and kill you because you're not allowed to do that in high sec. Well, actually, you're allowed to do it. It just comes with repercussions. So I mean that has some um, that does a little bit of this. But then again, we looked at the war declaration system. Are you familiar with that system?
Yes, war declaration system. Yes.
Yeah. So we did a study on that. What has it now been? 2 years ago or a year ago? 2 years ago, I think, where we found out that basically it was being kind of being taken advantage of because you can just pay money to keep people at an endless state of war. Uh,
Mhm.
so meaning that they are targets, and we had found cases of uh, really powerful corporations kind of actively seeking out new players and targeting them in this manner, which was kind of breaking a healthy flow of new players into the game, because basically if you were starting new corps, it was almost impossible to be able to expand and grow, because as soon as you reached a certain level, you always became target of these kind of elite corps. So we looked into that system and we put in new incentives in place. We changed it, and actually I haven't done a full study on the full effect of it, but it did have an effect of getting more new players to form corps and healthier entry into the game. So I mean, every now and again, when we start seeing, the especially if there's like a systematic glitch or systematic exploit in the game that's uh, you know causing stuff like this, where like new players really can't blossom in the game or something like this, we do intervene. Um, then we've also seen just players themselves often take this upon themselves. If a corp or an alliance is doing something that they
Mhm.
know is not healthy for the world, they will in some case just police it themselves, or attack them or invade them. Or some of them have codes of honors, others have not. And like you said before, we have all types of people. So I mean, we sometimes the ruthless are more in charge, and sometimes it's the helpers. But what I thought was super interesting is we asked about this in a survey a couple of years back, when we asked our players to self-describe, like, what type of player are you? And I talked about this at the Amsterdam presentation. Is we expected most of our players to be like, I'm a killer, I like competing, I like doing combat. But actually the highest category was helpers, with 44%, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, and this surprised everybody in the company. Like we knew that we had a portion of our players who were helpers, but not that almost half of players consider themselves helpers. And when we looked at that player segment specifically, it turns out that they have higher engagement, that they're more satisfied, that they play longer. So those also seem to be, our happiest, healthiest players. And it makes you think, because what our game seems to have achieved is that this mixture of, because it allows ruthlessness to happen, because it allows players to backstab and be pretty ruthless and kind of make their own rules, it also creates tremendously rich opportunities to help others. And I
Mhm.
mean, if you just think about human history, like something like World War II, right, which is a horrible, horrible moment in history, and we have so many horrible stories, but World War II also has like the best helper stories, right? Like the
Yes.
best stories of regular people stepping up and really risking their lives to help somebody, because the field of opportunities to be of assistance to another human being was so rich during those 6 years, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is like what you mentioned is like it comes back goes to the I you did mention it in Eva Amsterdam, and I was asking every player about their experience of loss in the game, and
Yeah.
it is so real. Like how did Eve came up with this? Like was it just something that happened and you or was it planned? This idea of creating a sense of loss for the players, and you realize oh this is getting people excited for it.
Yeah. So this has always been a staple of the game. Long before I ever joined the company, I joined the company 5 years ago, and this was in the original design purpose for the game, where the original creators of the game wanted loss to be meaningful, and they wanted it to matter. So like when you lose something, it's not like in most games you can just uh, respawn or immediately buy it back or something. It would be like, hey, you actually lost a chunk of time that you invested into the ship.
Yeah.
Um, which and again, this is a double-edged sword, and this is kind of what I keep coming back to in my research, is because of this, a lot of players uh, just don't last, and they're like, they put in like 3 weeks doing something in the game, and then they lose their ship, and they realize that, wow, I'm literally at the back at like 3 weeks ago, like I have to build everything up again. And a lot of players will just leave at that point because they're not used to this in a video game. But a certain type of player, and a certain segment of people seem to really revel in this challenge, and they're like, oh, you know if I do this again, I know now what mistakes I must avoid, and why I shouldn't have done this, and now I can do this better. But they also start realizing is when you inflict something on other players, that is also much more real. So
Yeah.
like, it's not only what you lose is more meaningful, it's also what you gain is more meaningful. So when you manage to loot another player, you're like, oh, I actually took a couple of weeks worth of time from that player, and
Mhm.
it's like, this is huge. Like the stakes in this game are much higher, which makes the engagement and the emotions. And I don't know if you've talked to any of the players about like combat, but I did a research study 3 years ago when I was it was like, what makes combat in Eve fun, and I started talking to players about their combat experiences, and almost all of them experienced like actual combat shakes, like when they were involved in a real fleet fight, which they had been preparing for, like for days or weeks. They would describe, just like real life soldiers do, like they would have like shaking hands after it and sweating, and because they were so engaged in it, because they were like, there's so much on the line here for me and my corporation.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool, and you don't really hear that a lot from other games.
No, I really don't. I did spoke with a few of the players regarding their experience in combat. As like they were talking about like how they prepped. There was one like Starship Resurrected, the YouTube channel. He has a YouTube channel. He's talked about how he came up with this military doctrine, and he asked his fellow players to actually train with him a little bit, and they trained based on this doctrine, and then one day they had an attack, and that was the most meaningful experience they had together as friends, because it was like everybody kind of followed that pattern that they've learned already, and they defeated the enemy even though they were outnumbered, and were like, I'll never forget that moment. And the thing about every one of these players I spoke with is that their tone of voice and the way they were talking about Eve as if it's real life. It was
Yeah,
it was a little crazy for me because like one person is actually head of data fraud in Berlin, data fraud management in Berlin, and he was like talking about like people who would betray in a game, and he was like angry about them. And he said, "I've been working on this kind of matters for days and like for years now, and people who do shitty things in a game basically have the same character traits that I have in doing a data fraud in real life." And I was going like, okay,
okay.
that's all right, or that's interesting. And by the way, I know you guys have had a problem. I know, by the way, you have very limited amount of time, so I'm just gonna try to. I don't. How much longer do you have, by the way?
Let me check.
Yeah, I don't want to take you too long.
So I have, so I have 10 more minutes on this, but I came in late, so I can do like 15 to 18 minutes more. I have to
Oh,
prep
it's
for the next meeting, which is at 10:30. Yeah.
okay. We'll stick with 10 minutes. I don't want to keep you longer. Okay. Thank you very much. One thing is like you're having problem retaining new players.
Yeah.
It has came up and again and again. What is it that you hope to achieve for that, and how do you want to change that for the new players so they can stick around with the game? What are the new measures you've taken? Like I know one of them is fleet finders, and
Yeah.
I would actually I don't know how close it could be to Finder in Warcraft, but because there's nobody liked it in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, they liked it in a sense, but everybody who used Dungeon Finder in Warcraft said, "I do not have before. I used to have become friends with them. I used to have an interaction with them before I entered the dungeon with them. So during the battle, I would have an interaction."
Yeah.
With the Fleet Finder, I wonder if that would have the same effect. But with the Dungeon Finder, it's like I just click Dungeon Finder and I'm in. We just kind of said hi and then we started playing the whole game. So I wonder if that would have the same ramifications for EVE Online.
Yeah, it's a good question. I like it. I mean, it might be. It's really hard predicting the future, but I would always be wary in comparing games, especially to EVE Online, because EVE Online is really different from most games, and
Yes.
the level of commitment you usually need is bigger. So I mean, I'm not 100% sure on the specifics of how the Fleet Finder will be execute it, but depending on how much time you need to prepare, what you're doing with the fleet, stuff like this, I think it can have a range of different outcomes, um, depending on that. But it's also always this question of, like if you're a new player in the game, when are you willing to, be exposed to playing with other players? So our research indicates that most players don't like to, and they don't want to in their first few days of playing to be exposed to other players. But when they do get exposed, accidentally or on purpose by other players, like when somebody, most of the stories, if you ask players that are loyal, successful players in the game today, like how did they come to join another group of players or join the social structure? It is very often something like, well, somebody attacked me, I was killed, and then that person who killed me started telling me like, hey, actually you shouldn't be flying without your shields up, or you shouldn't be using autopilot, or they gave me some tips, and they're like, if you want, I could help you figure this stuff out, or if you want, you can join my corp, or hey, like there was something where somebody entered their lives and kind of took them on an adventure, and those type of social connections seem to be the best ones, because if you compare those to the players when they initiated this on themselves, like when they started applying for corps or reaching out to other players, actually you're 2.5 times more likely to be engaged in the game and not have quit if somebody approached you versus if you approached somebody. So the difference is huge. And if you just think about it in your own life, if you're thinking about like, maybe you're thinking you want to change jobs at a point or something, and you're like, well, I would have to like start finding a job, looking for the wanted ad, stuff like this. But all of a sudden a company approaches you on like LinkedIn or Facebook or something, and they're like, hey, Artie, we've been looking for talented UX designers, and we saw your stuff on Twitch or wherever, and we kind of like what you're doing, and would you want to have a conversation with us? It's much more likely that you will enjoy that path versus the path where you have to kind of engage and start everything up. So that is one of the thinking behind the Fleet Finder, is that it can empower these types of um, meetups, but it has a lot to do with the execution of it. And this comes back to, because you were talking about players' point before on like ACL lists and being able to advertise your fleets and stuff like this. I think if we can empower our players to better seek out other players, that is always the best thing we can do, because the players usually do this the best. They're usually the experts at recruiting players. So CCP and Blizzard or any game developer that has an MMO can set up a system, but at the end of the day, if you empower the current players to have value in seeking out new players and teaching them and indoctrinating them or mentoring them into the game, I think those are probably usually the best implementations. But those can be tricky from a design perspective, though.
Yeah, that's true. I don't. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to tackle. How has but I would like to stay on the point, but I think I'll move on to the next one, and I would love to share. I'm gonna keep interviewing other players, and if I find something now, I have your email. I would love to share. If I find something, would it be okay if I share it with you?
Oh, absolutely. I would love it. I would love it. Please do.
Definitely.
I just sent you an email actually. When I was supposed to be
Right.
in this meeting, I was writing an email. So you have my email address now.
Yeah. And how do you pronounce it? Trigvi. Trigvi.
Tryggvi. Yeah,
Trig.
Tryggvi.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was a bit tricky for me. Not as tricky as Ardavan, trust me. I've been in Malaysia for 9 years, not one person that pronounced my name correctly. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
it's
can
quite
relate.
difficult. Yeah, it is. But how what kind of has there been any social environment experiments CCP has done that has failed in for Evil 9 that you're like, okay, that did not, I want to create a social interactive experience between the players, yet it all just went
Yeah,
downhill.
yeah. So um I was on a team that started work on something called Resource Wars. Are you familiar with that feature?
No, I'm not.
No. Okay, so that was a feature that was supposed to build a little bit around this logic, where we were trying to create a group incentive to do PvE content together.
Okay.
We created something called Resource Wars, and I mean there was a portion of the players that really did like that content, but overall I would say it was a failure and it didn't reach the targets that we had, and it didn't have the impact that we were hoping for, which was basically creating a whole bunch of connections with new players and building groups. I mean, there are a whole bunch of reasons for why that happened. I think the main reason was that the NPCs we had weren't smart enough, but also just creating groups and sort of group incentives to play together is difficult. I mean, one of the most complex things you ever do is building like a matching system. Um, so I would say that project, although like the reasoning and logic behind it was solid, didn't turn out the way we were hoping from especially a social standpoint. So definitely we've attempted things and it not gone as we were hoping. But on the flip side of that, we've been doing stuff like like the magic moment. I don't know if you're familiar with that project, where we are identifying players who are experiencing their first major loss in the game, and we reach out to them, and we give them a social connection where there's an actual human GM who reaches out and like, hey, I just noticed that you lost your ship. Uh, I just wanted to see if you were okay, and I noticed that you lost your ship doing A, B, and C, and do you know that it's smart to fly with your shield? So I'll be like, have a short dialogue, and then in some cases, that person is reimbursed the ship or given some sort of hope or connected to a new player corp or something. And this is a pilot program we've been running now for a few months, and it's tremendously successful. Basically, every player that goes through this program uh, becomes a way better player after it. So
Are
we've
these
we've had
yeah,
instances of both.
and these GMs that you talk about, are they like working for you, or are they like selected groups from the game that you asked them to help out with this project?
No, these are CCP employees.
CCP employees, and that's actually a very brilliant idea. I helped out with a company with recruiting, and just having people reach it, like instead of having personalized email, I was just told them like having personalized email to each employee that you're going to recruit actually helps out a lot better with the recruitment management. This is it's different, but I'm just saying is like having something aside from the computer talking back to you does help
Yeah.
out a lot.
Yeah.
And what is also how I know they use this CIA formula that you mentioned in your talk regarding how to build connections within the game.
Yeah.
How did that, like a few things I believe like has kind of gone away. Like proximity has kind of gone away as an element within this. Am I correct or I'm making a mistake?
As an element in what? Sorry.
Proximity, like the four elements for becoming friends is like
Yeah.
proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity.
Yeah.
A few things like proximity and frequency has kind of have. Do you believe it has fizzled away in the game, especially because of Discord and like back channels and everything? Because you can immediately connect with the player, and if you want, you just keep interacting with them. Or
Okay.
is it still?
I'm not sure I'm following you. Gone away? You mean like do you think that there's less proximity even now than it used to be, or?
No, I'm saying is like the element is less present, so it doesn't matter if there's proximity anymore or the frequency anymore. But like the
Yeah.
frequency can happen outside of the game because if I'm interested in you, I can use Discord to talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in those cases, I think it depends on where you're at in the curve of meeting somebody. Like if you and me are just meeting now in the game for the first time versus if we've been playing together for a year, it's
Yes.
going to be very different what the proximity is. If we've been playing together for a year, we've probably set up our own Discord channel. We might even have a Slack channel. We might have added each other on Facebook. We might know how each other looks like. We might even be, communicating through video cameras. So that increases the proximity. Versus like if we're meeting for the first time, um, the proximity there is going to be probably chat, local chat, and so I think it's up to the players on like escalating that, and I think I'm not sure how to answer your question because I don't know like what why are you asking that question? What to you has driven the proximity down in the game? I'm not sure where you're coming from with this question.
The question is because I'm under trying to see is like okay before like in the games because you meet another character within the game and if another player for example another player you meet in the game and you're trying to have a bit of a interaction with them but it was
Yeah,
very hard to keep and maintain that connection that you had before and now because I believe because of like things like Discord and other channels because the second you meet that other person, you don't necessarily need to have that in-game interaction as much. You can move on to back channels like Discord and have a conversation with them and like maybe keep in touch with them in a sense. Before it used
yeah.
to go away. I believe like it used to go
Okay,
away.
but to me, this strengthens the proximity. I mean, you're meeting on Discord because of the game. I mean, if somebody just sent you an email out of the blue and be like, "Hey, do you want to talk to me on Discord?" and there was no context, you would never ever do it. But if you meet
Yeah.
somebody in game and you're like, "Hey, we should plan an attack on this guy," and you're like, "Yeah, let's do it," and then like, "Hey, wouldn't it be better if we meet on Discord so we can, have an unhindered communications line?" Then you're willing to do it because the game is giving you that social alibi to connect on Discord. So I think that increases the proximity. So I think tools like Discord have added to the depth of proximity. But then again, that relationship can then, it can just move on. And I mean, I've talked to players who said like we formed a clan in EVE Online, and then that clan moved on to play other games. And I think that's true. Also, we get clans from other games come into EVE Online, so it can take on a life of its own. But I think it deepens the experience in the game. I mean, if you were to ask me like, do you want players only to be able to talk to each other in-game chat and nothing else when they're playing EVE, or can they talk to each other in-game chat and Discord while playing EVE? I would always say like, yes, please also Discord, because
Also,
that means it
yeah,
deepens the experience in general.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, I see your point. I might have misjudged I have misjudged that idea of the friendship formula in my own mind. And I know you need to go. I just want to end it with this. Is like, what is the ultimate goal for the for Eve Online in the future in order to create a better experience for the players, as in a better in-game interaction experience for the players? What can we expect in the future?
So we've been penetrating the community and the company now very heavily over the last year and a half or so with this friendship formula stuff, because we believe in those research we've kind of quantitatively now and qualitatively been able to showcase very convincingly that that this is the secret sauce behind Eve, that it's a connecting machine, it's a friendship making machine. Of course, that doesn't happen to all the players, but 73% out of the players that we do survey say that they've made a friend in Eve as a result of playing the game, which is amazing. And especially if you look at other forces, penetrating our community, like the loneliness epidemic, which has just become a huge problem, where like up to 40% of people in any age group are experiencing loneliness. So I think that is, at least that is to me. I mean, you probably get different answers on depending on which devs you would ask, but to me, this is one of the most exciting fronts for CCP and for Eve to delve deeper into, is like, how can we make the friendship machine more efficient? How can we ensure that like the average new player coming into the game and the average veteran has access to experiencing these intense, wonderful, engaging, combat shakes moment with other humans that deepen the bonds and creates real life meaningful friendships that can then extend into forming companies outside of the game, becoming real friends outside of the game, or just building something awesome together inside the game. And we have loads of opportunity. I mean, the opportunity space there is huge. There's so much stuff we can improve. I mean, especially from a UX standpoint, there's like an endless amount of small changes and improvements you can do just to make the flow more comfortable, to make it easier to find another human, to make it less stressful, to be exposed and vulnerable the initial stages. So I think we have a lot of really exciting and fertile ground to explore there, where my hope is that, like, if you're an average gamer, you hear about this game Eve Online and like it's a friendship maker, and you're like, okay, I want to go and check this out, and like within a few weeks of the game you already have interesting relationships forming, where you're like, oh, I can see if I would continue investing in this relationship, building a corporation with these three guys, from Algeria, Russia, and the US, that this could become something, meaningful for me. I think that is a really awesome path to pursue, and that is, this is the main reason I am excited to work for this company, because I believe we're putting something out there that's meaningful for people's lives, and improving the overall quality of their lives, inside and outside of the game.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for the answer. I know you need to go, so I'm just gonna tell you one thing I want to talk about was like, why is there less female players in this particular game?
Yeah.
And I have asked some questions around how to improve. I was actually speaking to Chris Crawford, the founder of GDC,
Okay.
last week, and he had some insights to just in general regarding how female players are listed. And I can email you regarding it, and we can, if you were interested, I would love to have another conversation with you later on.
Yeah,
If
absolutely. I would
yeah,
love that. I mean, I'm not directly working on anything related to this, but this is something I've always wanted to delve deeper into. And there is a project right now that is exploring this. I'm not a part of it, but I just I've kept like one foot in monitoring it, or just like looking at what they're doing. So anything in that area would be absolutely interesting to talk about.
all right. Thank you very much. I've already taken too much of your time. Thank you so much for your help, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. I was late, but yeah, nice to talk to you, RD, and looking forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much for your help. Talk to you later. Thank you.
All right, bye bye. Have a good one.
You too, man. Take care.
Bye.